Production funding for this program is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
They're aviators, they're entrepreneurs, they're philanthropists, and they're from the UK. They are the co-founders of Bremont, and we are here for a conversation with Nick and Giles English. So welcome to America. Let's start there. And speaking of welcome to America, you guys are on a journey from New York all the way to Texas, traveling through the US. So what do you think of the US so far?
What a great place, isn't it?
It is amazing. And actually, by doing it by road, instead of flying into an airport and nipping off and coming back to the airport, doing it by road, you see so much of the country you'd never see otherwise. So it's a beautiful, beautiful place.
You're not just doing it by road, you're doing it in classic cars, correct?
Yeah, we always wanted to sort of go on a proper road trip, and we thought if we got onto a modern car, it wouldn't be quite the same. And we got two old classic cars we had. Our father restored one of them, an E-Type, when we were little children, and another one's a very, very old Porsche. So we thought, let's bring them out to New York and drive across America. And we're here now, and it's been a long run, a week of driving many miles a day, and it's exhausting, but what a great place.
So what's been one favorite highlight so far?
One highlight has to be one was we did an amazing trip down through the Blue Ridge Mountains. So going from basically Washington down to Winston-Salem, and there's an incredible route there called the Skyline, and you're driving down there and you're seeing these incredible panoramic views to one side and then the same the other, and it's bears running across, tortoises, deer.
And I think the other one was went to Charlotte, and we went on a NASCAR circuit. So we took our cars with the pace car. NASCAR very kindly let us go on it, and that was just, what a great place was that.
So what was your top speed?
Well, they wouldn't let us go too quickly. Just 220 miles an hour.
Just call them cold trickle.
So let's start with the Bremont story. So your father, huge inspiration, and he himself a pilot, would take you on his trips, but also too really taught you guys how to kind of tinker around. So talk about your father. Share your father's story a little bit.
Yeah, he was an amazing guy. As a PhD aeronautical engineer from Cambridge who just had massive talents with his hands in building things, and he restored old aircraft that we still fly today. He played in a bluegrass band, so built all his own banjos. But one of his big passions was watches and clocks. So we grew up around these watches and clocks. So our childcare as children was being put in the workshop. There's no kicking the ball out in the yard and
go fix this watch.
Go fix this watch, and that's really where this passion for watchmaking came from.
And talk about the story behind even the name Bremont, because even that has a tie to a plane and a little bit of a fun journey there. But tell the story of Bremont.
Well, so Bremont started back in 2002, but before that, when we decided to go off and set up Bremont, we worked for a number of years, a lot more years-wise than we told our wives at the time. We said it would take a year and a half to set up our first watch, or come out with the first watch.
Was it like 5 years?
It took 5 years. So we're sheepishly going off to work. But the point was, during that period, we developed and we set up a little workshop and we developed this watch. But it took 3 years to get to the stage where we were ready with the watch, but we needed to name the watch. Our surname is English. We didn't want to name the brand English. I think the irony would have been lost on many, and trademarks would have been hard to get. And actually came down to a flying trip. Giles and I were doing a couple of years after an accident I had in a plane. Giles got me back up in the air, and we're flying down through France. We ran out of fuel, and we landed in this French farmer's field, and it's quite easy to do that in America or England, and you buy the farmer a bottle of whiskey and take his wife for a flight. In France, I think it's illegal, and you get the airplane impounded. So to cut a long story short, the chap who came to help us was a dear old farmer called Antoine Bremont. We ended up spending sort of 3 or 4 days with him in his farm. But he reminded us of our father, who, had he lived for another 30 years, that would have been him, tinkering away with tractors and gliders and things.
So when you were looking at the name, you said, hey, what about this story as a way to honor him?
Well, it was sort of, we said, oh, look, Anton Baron, we'd love to use your surname because it looked great on watch and it means something to us. And he, crazy Englishman, what's that all about? But I think our father, who died in a plane crash, and Nick was in that plane crash with him, it was very much honouring our father in a way that he would have loved to have been around and been involved in building something like this, and carry on this lovely, amazing tradition of British watchmaking.
So obviously aviation runs through your blood, and I mean, you guys have been in crazy accidents, but talk about your love still for flying, and not just flying, but vintage airplanes, and you're refurbishing them, and you're still taking your families out on flights. So talk about kind of the central thread of aviation that runs in your blood.
Well, I think as we grew up, our father did a lot of air show flying. So weekends we'd be nipping off to these air shows where it's sort of this high, shoved in the back of these old 1940s airplanes, and you grow up in it, don't you? It's again, something you're exposed to by your parents. And we learned to fly from a very early age. My father, Giles, and I all trained with the Air Force. And that love, that DNA of aviation's always been in the family. And then when we got old enough, we started doing the air show flying. Unfortunately, I was involved in this accident, as Giles said, in '95, and that changed things a little bit. But Giles got me back up in the air, and still fly to this day. So,
and I think old planes, old classic cars, watches, it's all these beautiful mechanical things. I mean, we don't make battery-powered watches. It's all cogs and gears, and these things last forever. And as an engineer, it's absolutely fascinating. And there's always been a strong adrenaline rush through our sort of blood, I think, which helps us get on. But it's all about adventure.
Tie that into some of the special pieces within the watches, because we were talking, off camera, and so many of these, you have special edition watches that have literally parts of planes or stories that are a part of the watch. So kind of share the story side of building these watches.
So every few years we come up with a limited edition watch, and it all started with this great friend of our family's, my father's, who restored a very famous Spitfire, and he had a panel of aluminium that he had to take off the plane, and he was holding it and said, "Do you realise this was flying in 1942 by a 19-year-old kid over Dresden?" And we looked in the clock in the Spitfire, it was this beautiful clock. So we made a watch incorporating that material, and it was called EP120. We only made 120 of these watches. And anyway, it literally flew off the shelves and became a massive collector's item. And that started this whole limited edition route going, and working with HMS Victory, the Royal Navy, with a watch on there. Bletchley Park, the original home of the code-breakers in World War II. And more recently, we did an amazing watch with working with Amanda Wright, the Wright brothers, the great-grandniece of that, of Wilbur Norval. And working on that project was amazing. So it was a watch modelled off Orville's pocket watch, incorporating original fabric from the 1903 Wright Flyer. So these wonderful projects.
But what's quite nice about them is everyone has a sort of charitable angle. So, for example, the Wright Flyer, they wanted to make the Wright family home. So Orville's home, he died in 1948. They wanted to make it into a museum, and so we raised quite a chunk of money to help them refurbish the whole place. Right. So everyone we do has a sort of an angle like that.
Exactly.
Right. And you get this amazing watch mechanically with huge history, and it's doing a lot for charity, and it's raising their profile at the same time. And it becomes an obsessional piece for us.
Well, carry that forward, because even this trip that you're on here in the U.S., it's a fundraiser, so to speak, to raise money and awareness as well. So you do have where you're using the watches, you're using your actions to really be philanthropic. So talk about the trip right now.
Well, so the trip was always going to be starting upstate New York, heading down sort of almost east to Charleston, then back west again, and then ending up in Houston. Obviously, poor old America have been hauled over the coals in the last few weeks, and we have an ambassador and a good friend who's based in Houston, and he runs and owns a display team we're involved with, P-51 Mustangs, an incredible guy, wonderful, wonderful chap. And he does a huge amount for charity. And he set up this fund called the Freakin' Relief Fund to help all those. I mean, Houston's been, lots of parts have been decimated. And so we said, why don't we combine that with what we're doing here and bring awareness to his charity and helping. So we're seeing some wonderful retailers en route, and and they're bringing awareness to it as well. So it's an incredible cause and
an amazing fund. So 100% of all proceeds go straight to helping these people out. There's no management. There's none of that going on.
I love it.
So it's lovely, and there's a reason for doing it.
And is it Victor's Fund? There's another one that you guys are big supporters of as well.
So Invictus is probably a good percentage, probably 25% of Bremont's business is doing work for the military, which we're very proud of. And we've been involved with I don't know if you saw the Invictus Games, which Prince Harry was very much involved with. It was injured servicemen, often triple amputees doing these incredible things, swimming, almost like an Olympics for disabled and unfortunate military guys and girls, and we got involved with them, and again it's raising money for their cause, helping the British team get out there. So I think it's happening in September, next few weeks in Toronto. So that's a lovely thing to be involved in, and it's so inspiring. These people are phenomenal people to meet.
Well, and that's where I was going to go, is the fact that you're able now as entrepreneurs to be able to use your craft for a higher purpose. What does that mean to you? And especially, both of you have families now and your children, to see that, wait a second, you can use your profession to make a difference and help others. Does that play in at all?
I think it really does. And I think as an entrepreneur, you are inevitably, especially if you're in a manufacturing business, you're employing people. And as soon as you employ one person, their livelihood becomes your responsibility. And we set out at the beginning to bring back British watchmaking. And everyone thinks Swiss made for high-end watches, but turn of the century making half the world's watches. The world sets its time by Greenwich Mean Time, not Geneva Mean Time. And so bringing that whole industry back has always been the heart of what we've tried to do, and bring employment to the UK and in manufacturing. And I think not just that, but all these other things we work with. You're buying a watch that will work in 200 years' time. Yes, you need to service it. So there's beautiful mechanical things, and there has to be some soul and reason behind what we're doing. Otherwise, why do it?
Well, and talk about it from that perspective. It'd be fun for you two as brothers, but share maybe one life lesson, because you said it took 5 years to launch this. So you thought, oh yeah, a year and a half, we'll be up and running. 5 years later, it's like, So share maybe one lesson as an entrepreneur learned.
Tell the 3-time rule, isn't it?
It is actually. We had a wonderful, CFO who, FD. She came in and she said, the 3-time rule. I said, what's the 3-time rule? So it takes 3 times as long, 3 times as expensive, and what's the
3 times harder?
3 times harder.
So it's like renovating a home or remodeling.
It is a bit like that.
If you work off the 3 times rule, and I think just in anything, achieve anything in life, you just have to work really hard. Right. And success doesn't just sort of fall in your lap, and certainly hasn't for us anyway. And it's just a lot of hard work to grow that.
But I think passion. The passion gets you through a huge amount in life. You have your ups and downs, but if you're passionate about what you do, anything in life, you find an exit point. You find a route to go through, don't you? And it's
absolutely.
And I'm not sure working with your brother is the best thing, but we sort of can get over that.
But he's incredibly talented, sweeping the floor, photocopying, very good at photocopying. But we do have to look after him. This is my charitable work, is looking after my brother.
Yeah, that's very kind of you. Thank you.
Such generosity. How is it with the families too? Because that's a whole nother layer. Is you've got the brothers working together, but then the family's all holidays and everything else. I mean, there's got to be, I think, missing your father, this kind of neat element of our families are still well connected and close.
I think with families, and especially working with close family, it's that there's ultimate trust there, and you all have the same end goal in mind, to happiness for all. And I think the only downside is when you work with a brother, actually you talk about work and you lose some of your friendship because you're talking about work the whole time.
But you do have music together, right?
We do. We've been this is why it's so great being in Memphis. We've been in a really bad rock band since we're like 16. Our repertoire hasn't improved at all over 20 years.
But you do have some Elvis songs in there, right?
We do indeed. So
the simple Elvis songs, without any complicated chord changes.
Anything more than 3 chords, Giles gets a bit stuck. But it's but we're really looking forward to going to see what you've got to offer around here. Music shots, Graceland,
Growing up, Nick always wanted to go to Disneyland, but for me, it was about Memphis, and we're huge fans of Elvis. So actually on the trip, coming to this whole area it is amazing for us.
Well, yeah, I mean, you've got Sun Studios, you've got obviously Graceland, you've got Rock and Soul Museum, you've got the Soulsville area. I mean, there's so much history right here in this area.
What's so special is you come to this country and you often, we meet Americans and you'll ask them, how many countries you've been to in Europe and where have you been, and you realise there's so much to see in this country. This much on a map in the UK gets you from one end to the other, or 2 hours driving gets you halfway across England. Here it gets you a quarter way across the state, and there's so much more to see. So it is an incredible country, I have to say.
Well, even growing up and spending time in like Warwickshire and London and all those places, I mean, amazing on both sides to be able to have that between the Beatles and Elvis and all the collaboration in between. So talk about, because one of the things I think that makes you very unique is the celebrities that have latched on. And I know Bear Grylls early on was a big supporter of the watches and took them out. And he's one of those adventurers, and he's got his own shows and things where he takes the celebrities out. But I mean, he's literally living in the mountains for weeks at a time and living off nature and eating ants and all sorts of craziness. So he's putting the watch through the ringer, banging it on every mountain you can think of. But talk about kind of that side of in movies. I mean, you've got Kingsman, you've got so many movies now that you guys are a part of. Talk about the celebrity status side of this.
I think we're not a celebrity brand in the sense we'll go and pay our staff to do the great modelling shots on ads. That's sort of not what we're about. And but we've been very fortunate that famous people have wanted to wear our watches. They want to have something which is a bit different, very exclusive. And we've become friends with many of these people because of that. And I think if it's in life, you can't try and please everyone. But if you've got the people who've got similar skill sets, the mindset, they love their classic cars, motorbikes, etc. And it sort of works that way. But it's never been something we've pushed that hard. But been very lucky.
Who's been, and it doesn't have to be necessarily them wearing your watch, but who's been someone that you've, either a famous person or just someone important that you thought, I'm really happy and excited to have met that person? Because you met princes and all sorts of things.
We do. There's some, we're very lucky. There's so many wonderful people. As I was saying before, you can, it's not just about famous people, it's about inspirational people.
Right.
And you can meet, as I was saying, an athlete from the Victor's Games, and you'll come out in tears. It is so inspiring. And you'll meet, some incredible,
but I'm on that. Prince Harry, working with him on Invictus and came to the speech, he's the most inspirational guy, actually. We came away and, yes, he's very famous, but as an individual involved with this Invictus and what he's done is amazing. So I think that's being involved with people who we feel are actually really giving something back and doing something great. That's what inspires us.
We're so lucky. We've got some amazing, ambassadors, inverted commas, people who wear the watches and go off and do some amazing things. So we've got a couple of guys at the moment, as an example, called Expedition 5, and they're off walking across the 5 biggest islands on the planet. So Greenland, Papua New Guinea, Borneo, these sort of places. But they both suffered from PTSD and from the military, and they came out and they were wrecks for a long time. And then this has given them this, and you meet these people and you go off and see what some of these ambassadors are doing. Or Ben Saunders, he's walking across the whole width of Antarctica solo, doing Shackleton's route, and did Scott's route a couple of years ago. These people are very, very inspiring. So we're very lucky. You're meeting some amazing people the whole time.
Well, absolutely, and I think that's got to then go back into even further what you're doing, where it's like, look at, we're able to make a difference, we're able to, be an inspiration on our end, but then how we can leverage this to do even greater good and reach even more people is extremely powerful.
Yes, and that's if we can grow as a company and do that and enjoy the process as you're going along. I think just the sadness for us is that Elvis never had the opportunity to wear a watch, because that would have been the right up there for us. But
what about being an international company? So when you talk about, I know that FedEx is one that you're going to be meeting with as well, and going to the hub here in Memphis and seeing that, which is crazy when you think the amount of time coming in and then getting out and how that works is amazing. But being an international company, what are some of the opportunities, the challenges? I mean, how has that been from not just there to USA, but just all around the world?
I think international business is incredibly difficult because you have to change your strategy in each country. You need, but we're an engineering business. Our daily job is manufacturing very complicated things, but you then have to market them around the world and have that set up. And if we look at America alone, for you British person come out here, you think, well, America is one, but it's not. And what we've learned in America is that you have to treat it as lots of different countries.
It's almost like Europe in itself.
And that adds real challenges. And then your message to Hong Kong and China or to Australia has to be different again. And there's Nick and I, we can spend every day of the year on the road, seeing retailers, seeing customers.
See, Giles goes off and sees them, and I have to go and follow and undo the damage. You see, so it's
damage control. But both of you are on social media. I think especially now that tends to help a little bit. Where even for myself, following you before I even met you, it's like you kind of get to know both of your personalities. You get to see a little bit of that. So I think from a global audience, that helps a little bit to communicate.
I think social media has changed the way modern, new companies, young companies can market themselves. And if you take the watch industry 20 years ago, it was about you spent this much on advertising, you'll get this much revenue. And that sort of business model worked for decades. Now it's not like that at all. It's there's the whole millennial sort of age group, which use different forms of
and you want to get
messaging.
to understand the personality behind a brand, and social media is able to do that.
Right.
And I think brands that don't actually show a personality in it, it's just a sort of faceless marketing brand, they're going to have problems going forward. And but it's difficult. So should you be with your children or tweeting something or Instagramming something? So that's another challenge.
So what do your families think of this? What do your wives think? I mean, is it one of those where they're now in the business themselves in the sense that it's a true family, or is it one of those where they look at it and think, wow, this is they get to go off and have fun and do all the amazing stuff, and like how is it family wise with you guys with the kids and family?
Well, it's funny. I'm quite immersed in it because my wife Catherine, she actually runs the military side of Bremont.
Okay.
So she's been immersed in it. She's worked with Giles and I for how many years? 15 years?
Yeah, a long time.
A long time. So our conversation at home is really exciting.
Yeah.
So what happened at work? Watches. Giles' wife is a teacher, so it's they have a bit of different conversation.
Okay.
So I have a little bit of balance, and you have to justify that this trip through America is all about work.
Right.
It's all it's not. We're going to enjoy it at all. So that often is quite a difficult sell at home. But I think it's a lovely life, and they love being part of it and seeing something grow. And I think we'd be very sort of difficult people to live with if we weren't enjoying it.
Give me one family tradition, and it can be one that you guys share together or individually with your own families, but give me one just from a culture standpoint of some of the things that you enjoy to do, either around the holidays or just not. I mean, it can be a favorite place to visit, but give me one little tradition.
Mine would be we love going on these sort of little flying trips. So you bundle the whole family in the back of an old airplane and you go off to, for example, Isle of Wight, and you don't quite know what you're going to expect. You don't book up a hotel or anything. You just go off and you go on a little adventure on these sort of little breaks because you can nip over to northern France and do all these amazing things. So we've got quite into that. But
and how cool is it to show up? Because some come in with like these fancy private jets that are and you're coming in at a vintage.
This certainly isn't
cool.
that. Right. This is the polar opposite of that. And
use your children to wipe the oil off the plane and all that sort of stuff. It's there's nothing glamorous about that, but a lot of fun. Yeah.
Your tradition, I mean, is
amazing. I think it's sort of, my wife's a very good cook, so we have a lovely vegetable garden, and it's a sort of Sunday lunch. In England, it's a proper roast lunch on a Sunday with all the vegetables from the garden, and not actually doing anything, and banning phones from the children. No one's allowed to do any of that, and it's just switching off, which is a lovely thing to do.
It's good to hear that you have the same problems with the kids and the phones and technology that we have here.
Too busy watching American films and sitcoms and all that sort of stuff. So it's sort of.
So obviously, you know, we're trying to recruit you to Memphis, taking you to Graceland, Sun Studios, everything we mentioned about Stax Museum, American Soul Music. Where should Americans go? Here's your chance to put on the ambassador hat for the UK, but where should we go and visit if we go outside of obviously the Bremont stores and seeing everything there?
Do you know what's like? Say you went to London, for example. London's a good place to start. You can go there for almost a day and walk around and some amazing sights within. You could land in, for example, one end and see Buckingham Palace, walk down the road and go and see the Cabinet War Rooms, which is where Churchill, all his bed, his cigar, all that sort of stuff still left from the cigar. That's an amazing place. And then you can walk over and see the House of Parliament. And there's so much to see within London. London's a great place. But there's also you've got a much bigger country here, but we have some amazing countryside. You go off to the Cotswolds, the Chilterns, Bath is a lovely. There are some wonderful, wonderful places.
And the great thing is just driving through, you come across these wonderful little villages where
pubs
and where Bremont's based in Henley-on-Thames, known for its rowing. It's the most beautiful little town, and definitely Scotland. Go and visit that. You might not understand the accents; it's very confusing up there. But absolutely beautiful countryside. So there's a lot to see in England, and
you can do it a lot quicker than you can do over here. You can really do a road trip and get it done in a week. Which is good.
I greatly appreciate all you do for using your watches to give back as well, for change making and being change makers. Greatly appreciate you guys being on a conversation with Nick and Giles English. Thank you for watching.
And I think the other one was went to Charlotte and we went on a NASCAR circuit. So we took our cars with the pace car. NASCAR very kindly let us go on it. And that was just, what a great place was that.
So what was your top speed?
Well, they wouldn't let us go too quickly. Just 220 miles an hour.
Just call them cold trickle.
So let's start with the Bremont story. So your father, huge inspiration, and he himself a pilot, would take you on his trips, but also too really taught you guys how to kind of tinker around. So talk about your father. Share your father's story a little bit.
Yeah, he was an amazing guy. As a PhD aeronautical engineer from Cambridge who just had massive talents with his hands in building things, and he restored old aircraft that we still fly today. He played in a bluegrass band, so built all his own banjos. But one of his big passions was watches and clocks. So we grew up around these watches and clocks. So our childcare as children was being put in the workshop. There's no kicking the ball out in the yard and
go fix this watch.
Go fix this watch, and that's really where this passion for watchmaking came from.
And talk about the story behind even the name Bremont, because even that has a tie to a plane and a little bit of a fun journey there. But tell the story of Bremont. Welcome to America. Let's start there. And speaking of welcome to America, you guys are on a journey from New York all the way to Texas, traveling through the U.S. So what do you think of the U.S. so far?
What a great place, isn't it?
It is amazing. And actually, by doing it by road, instead of flying to an airport and nipping off and coming back to the airport, doing it by road, you see so much of the country you'd never see otherwise. So it's beautiful, beautiful place.
You're not just doing it by road, you're doing it in classic cars, correct?
Yeah, we always wanted to sort of go on a proper road trip, and we thought if we got onto a modern car, it wouldn't be quite the same. And we got two old classic cars we had. Our father restored one of them, an E-Type, when we were little children, and another one's a very, very old Porsche.
Production funding for this program is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
They're aviators, they're entrepreneurs, they're philanthropists, and they're from the UK. They are the co-founders of Bremont, and we are here for a conversation with Nick and Giles English. So, welcome.
So we thought, let's bring them out to New York and drive across America. And you know, we're here now, and it's been a long run, a week of driving many miles a day, and it's exhausting. But what a great place!
So, what's been one favorite highlight so far?
One highlight has to one was we did an amazing trip down through the Blue Ridge Mountains. So going from basically Washington down to Winston-Salem, and there's an incredible route there called the Skyline, and you're driving down there and you're seeing these incredible panoramic views to one side and then the same the other, and it's bears running across, tortoises, deer.